India and China bilateral relations has seen a lot of ups and downs since the last many decades. Especially in the last one decade, a lot of skirmishes and a lot of border standoffs has been witnessed between India and China border areas. Also, the relationship between India and China is nothing new. India and China has been closely related to each other since last many centuries and since last many millennials as well. Since ancient ages, India and China's cultural relationships has been very deep rooted, especially religious relationships. But after 1947, India's independence and subsequently the formation of China and eventually the 1962 Indo-China War, this has basically led to our relationship becoming worsened and worsened over the next coming few decades. Now, in the last 10 years, especially in the western sector and the eastern sector of India and China borders, relationship have worsened and India has claimed a large part of territory of China. But recently, a very positive development has been witnessed between the two. So what you can see here is that India and China, so basically India has reached an agreement with China on line of actual control patrolling, and also their resolution of friction points have been achieved. That is what has been announced by our Foreign Secretary. Also, India-China border agreement could be seen on October of 2024, which is again a very positive development. And patrol rights on two areas, that is Depsang Plains and Demchuk, has to be restored in accordance to this particular agreement, and it will be closely coordinated by both the sides. So one thing is very clear, that this Depsang Plains and Demchuk patrolling rights in these two areas have been restored vis-a-vis this agreement which has been done on October of 2024. Also, there are certain other friction points as well. Like first is Galwan Valley, and then there is Pangong So area, Pangong So Lake area. Now, in this area, the disengagement of troops was achieved 2 years back, and the status quo remains. So the status in these two areas, that is Galwan Valley area and Pangong So area, the status remains the same. Now, what is this whole issue all about? What is this agreement all about? And why India and China are having border disputes, especially in the western sector? All these things we'll be trying to analyze and understand in this session. Hello, my name is Preetpal Singh, and today's topic is India-China border issues and the recent agreement. Now, if you see on the board very clearly, it shows different sectors of borders between India and China. India and China border can be classified into three prominent sectors. This sector over here is classified as western sector. But one thing to note here is that both India and China, they have in total a boundary line of 4050 kilometer, which is of course of three sectors, but there are certain states, that the state of Jammu and Kashmir, which is currently a union territory, and union territory of Ladakh. So it is safe to say that union territory of Ladakh, then Uttarakhand, then Himachal Pradesh, Sikkim and Arunachal Pradesh, these are the states or the areas in our country which borders with Chinese area. Now let's come to this western sector. Now western sector's boundary is 2150 kilometer long, that is 2150 kilometer long. And these two sides, they differ over the boundary line which separates Jammu and Kashmir region with the Xinjiang province of China. Now currently it is the Ladakh region and Xinjiang province of China. And India, it accuses China of illegally occupying one area here, that is the area of Aksai Chin. We'll be studying about that area in detail in the later part of the video. But for you to know right now is that these areas were involved in the 1962 war between India and China. So this area was one of the reason for war between India and China in 1962. Another area which was the reason of war was this area, that is the eastern sector. So this is the western sector. This is the eastern sector, and in middle there is this middle sector which is 625 kilometer long. Now this is relatively very stable, and both the sides do not have much agreement over this area. Now coming to this eastern sector, it is close to 140 kilometer long, and here the contention is in relation to McMahon line. Now China thinks of Arunachal Pradesh as the part of China, but we all know it is an integral part of India. But China claims Arunachal Pradesh and whole of Arunachal Pradesh. And again, that was a bone of contention in 1962 war as well. Now with this, we get to know, at least we have a bit of idea that how the border between India and China looks like. Now let us shift our focus towards the western sector in particular. And now let us see western sector in detail. You first see this particular map. Now this whole area is the area of Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh. Now, it is the erstwhile state of Jammu and Kashmir. Now it has been divided into Jammu and Kashmir Union Territory and Ladakh Union Territory. Now, this is Jammu and Kashmir region. This is Ladakh region, which is integral part of India. But this region is of Pakistan administered Kashmir or Pakistan occupied Kashmir. We call it as POK. So this area is of POK, again an integral part of India, but occupied by Pakistan. And this area, Aksai Chin over here, is Chinese administered. We can call it as China's occupied Kashmir, Chinese occupied Kashmir, or it is safe to say Chinese occupied Ladakh region. Now let us focus on few locations over here, because when we see the analysis and the details of the skirmishes between the two, these locations will be repeated number of times. See, there is one site over here. This is Galwan Valley. And this is where the clashes happened in 2020. We'll be discussing about the clashes, but here is where Galwan Valley is located. And this area over here, this is the line of actual control, that is LAC. Now let us see the locations in a bit more detail. Here it is Jammu and Kashmir, here it is Ladakh. This is Pakistan occupied Kashmir. This is Aksai Chin, which is occupied by China currently. Now if you see in this area, there are few key locations which are very important to understand. There is this point, which is the petrol point 14. It will be coming in the later part of the analysis. And there is one more area that is of Galwan Valley over here. So this is the petrol point 14. This is Galwan Valley. This area over here, this is Pangong Tso Lake. Pangong Tso Lake. Again, this will be coming in future. And this is the Sheok River area. This is the Sheok area. So all these four locations are very key locations with respect to India and China border clashes. So you should know about these areas. And one more area is of Demchok, which we recently saw in the introduction part. And one more area which is very important and which I want all of you to know is that of Shaksgam Valley, which is again a point of contention between India and China. Why? Because Shaksgam Valley earlier was a part of Pakistan occupied Kashmir, but it was ceded by Pakistan to China in 1963 illegally, because it is an integral part of India, and this is against the territorial integrity and territorial sovereignty of India as a country. Now with these maps, at least we are clear with the different locations which are existing between India and China's border, and what are the different areas and locations of contention between the two countries. Now let us try to understand that what is the whole issue all about, especially in the western sector. So now let us in brief way understand that in western sector what is really the problem. See, western sector is close to 2152 kilometer long, 2150 kilometer long approximately. Now it is between the Union Territory of Ladakh currently, erstwhile part of the state of Jammu and Kashmir, and also the Xinjiang province of China. So between Xinjiang province and Ladakh, this area, this western sector is located. We all saw in the map over here. We already saw in the map previously. And in this one area is contentious, we already saw. That is the area of Aksai Chin, which is again India considers it as an integral part of Ladakh, and China says it is a part of Xinjiang province. Now the sole reason that why this area is so contentious is because of the failure of British administration and colonial governments. So because of failure of the British Empire to clearly demarcate a legal border between India and China when India was a British colony, that is the sole reason why this issue still persists in the 21st century. Also during British rule in India, there were two lines which were proposed, two borders which were proposed. First was the Johnson's line, which you must have heard, it's very famous, and second was the McDonald's line. Now the Johnson's line, it was proposed in the year 1865, and it said that this Aksai Chin area, which we earlier saw in the map, in the erstwhile Jammu and Kashmir, now Ladakh is a part of India and is under India's control. That is what Johnson's line had to say, the border which was demarcated in the western sector. And there was another line after a few years, another border which was proposed by the British after a few years, that was Macartney-McDonald's line, which was proposed in the year 1893. Now this particular line, McDonald's line, it placed Aksai Chin area under Chinese control. So it said that Aksai Chin is under Chinese control and is a part of China. That is where the whole issue really started. So India, it believes Johnson's line to be correct, and India says that it is the rightful border, whereas China, they agree with the McDonald's line as correct. So both of these countries, they're having different perspectives and different point of view in this matter, and which is why the problem started, and this is why the problem still remains till date. Now since we are clear with this, now let us focus more on this 1962 Sino-Indian War, that is India-China War. But one thing is very clear when we saw this Johnson's line and McDonald's line, that lines were never mutually agreed upon. Britishers, they proposed these lines, but mutually both of the sides, they never agreed to this. And both the sides, mutually agreement was not really there. Now coming to this 1962 Sino-Indian War, that is India-China War. Now this can be categorized as one of the biggest failure of the then government which was existing, of the foremost Prime Minister of our country, and the then intelligence agencies also, Indian intelligence agencies. So what really happened was a 1200-kilometer road connecting Xinjiang and the Western Tibet was started as construction by Chinese authorities and by China. So China started constructing this road, and Indian PM during that period of time, that is Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, he categorically said that Aksai Chin is an integral part of Ladakh and India. But then the Chinese premier Zhou Enlai, he said that the western borders have never been delimited, and McCartney-MacDonald line makes Aksai Chin as a part of Chinese border. And he also says that it was the only line ever proposed to the Chinese government. So again, he reiterates that we are agreeing to the MacDonald line, and with respect to MacDonald line, Aksai Chin area is part of Chinese territory. And that is where the skirmishes started, and that is where the war eventually began. And of course, it was India's intelligence failure, because India for several months remained unaware of the Chinese activities in the Aksai Chin area, and that China has been building a road. And because of that, we were not able to ready our forces, and we were not able to deploy our forces in the right period of time. And eventually, what was the result of the war? China eventually became victorious. Now, because of this, China occupied a large part of Ladakh and a part of the eastern sector, that is Arunachal Pradesh as well. And China eventually returned territories in Arunachal to India and retained the control over 38,000 square kilometers of Aksai Chin, where the control of Chinese authorities remains till date. So if this war wouldn't have happened, Aksai Chin would have been a part of India. Now, since these things are very clear, let us now understand the chronology of the recent clashes, especially the Galwan Valley clash. See, all of these things, it started and genesis can be traced back to 2020. Of course, few years before that, there was Doklam standoff as well, but that was in the eastern sector. We are concerned more with the western sector right now, because the agreement is in that particular area only. That is why in the year 2020, on May 5th or 6th of 2020, a scuffle breaks out between India and Chinese troops at one area which we earlier saw, that was of Pangong Tso Lake, which we already saw in the map. Now, in this area, injuries were reported on the both sides. So, clashes started on May of 2020. Now, on May 9th, the tension spread to eastern sectors as well. So, there was a face-off between the armies of both the countries in Sikkim's Nakula area as well. And 4 Indians and 7 Chinese soldiers were injured in these clashes. So clashes began as early as May 2020, and eventually on May 10, army confirms the Pangong Tso and Nakula face-offs between the two armies, and Indian army confirms this. And on May 12, the reports of tension building up in the Galwan Valley also emerged. So by May itself, the tensions in Galwan Valley also started to emerge. And as tensions simmer in these areas, Pangong Tso area, Galwan Valley area, Hot Springs area as well, China accused Indian troops of trespassing the line of actual control. So China accused India that we are trespassing the line of actual control, which was totally inappropriate and totally not worthy. So during this period of time, China, they started marshalling its soldiers in this particular area. So China marshals about 5,000 soldiers on its sides of the LAC in Ladakh. And India also sends military reinforcements in that area. And by the end of May 2020, India's defense minister says that India and China are talking at military and diplomatic levels to resolve this issue and for de-escalation in these areas, which we already saw. So by May end, Defense Minister gave the assurance that both the countries, they are in talking terms, they are bilaterally talking with each other at military and diplomatic levels. So eventually after this, in June start, there was a meeting between the military officers of India and military officers of China, and they discussed a de-escalation plan to solve these issues which have been ongoing in the May of 2020. But on June 9, the army officers said that limited military engagement, they have started in the Galwan Valley and other areas. And on June 15th, that is 1 week after this statement, clashes, they erupted at Galwan Valley. So clashes, they went out of control, and in this Galwan Valley clash, 20 of Indian army soldiers, they lost their lives, they were martyred, and eventually at least 4 Chinese troops were also killed, and this came to be known as the Galwan Valley clash. So it happened during this period of time. After so many skirmishes in 2020 May, eventually in mid of June, this Galwan Valley clash took place. And this was very gruesome, very devastating, and for our whole country it was very heartbreaking as well. And 2 days after this, on 17th of June, our Prime Minister PM Modi said that India wants peace, but it will respond appropriately if India is provoked. That is what the statement of Honorable Prime Minister of India during that time was. And eventually after that, again meetings between the heads of both the countries. It started at diplomatic and military levels. So for de-escalation plans, our National Security Advisor, Shri Ajit Doval ji, and Chinese Foreign Minister, they had a telephonic conversation again to discuss the de-escalation plan and to stepwise de-escalate. Also on September 4th, that is after July, on September directly, our Defense Minister, Rajnath Singh ji, he met his Chinese counterpart as well on the sidelines of SCO meetings to discuss this standoff and to discuss de-escalation strategy also. So what we have seen till now, that in 2020 May and June, all these things started happening. And by mid of June, there is Galwan Valley clash. And eventually after that, there have been talks between both the countries for de-escalation and solution to this particular clash. And then came the year 2021. On February of 10, both the sides, they began complete disengagement at one area, that is the area of Pangong Tso area. And also on April 9, there was no progress on the disengagement after 11 rounds of talk. So till April of 9, 2021, there have been 11 rounds of talk between both the countries, diplomatic level and military level as well. And by August 4 and 5, that is after April, then on August, forward troops, they completely disengage at patrolling point 7A in the Gogra area. So in Gogra area, disengagement happens. In the Pangong Tso area, disengagement happens. In 2 places, we have seen disengagement till now. And in September 13th, India and Chinese army, they verified disengagement at patrolling point 15 in the Hot Spring area also. So by September of 2022, eventually we saw de-escalation in 3 prominent areas. First area was Pangong Tso area, then it is Gogra area, then it is Hot Springs area as well. And eventually on November 15th, our Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Chinese President, they have first face-to-face encounter at the sidelines of G20 meeting, which happened at Bali. And eventually on December 9th, India and Chinese troop, they engage in a scuffle again in LAC in the Yangtze area of Tawang in Arunachal Pradesh. Again, escalation started in Arunachal Pradesh area. That is the eastern sector. So while talks of disengagements are going on, again Chinese troops are clashing with the Indian troops in the Arunachal Pradesh region. So what we see here, that while China is talking, on the side-by-side clashes are going on in different areas. So Chinese government or Chinese military and army, they are trying to divert the attention of Indian soldiers into different areas by having a multi-fronted clashes, with India at the same point of time. So by 2023, we have witnessed one thing, that both the countries, their relationships are not in a very good way. They are not progressing in a very good way. And during COVID, we also saw one thing, that India and China, they had a lot of issues in relation to bilateral economic ties also. So after this 2020 clash, we have witnessed significant disengagement, or we have witnessed significant reduction in the bilateral ties between India and China, whether it be economic, whether it be cultural, whether it be border related or any other sphere as well. So on July 4th, 2024, our External Affairs Minister met Wang Yi on the sidelines of SCO summit, and again they talked about de-escalation plans. And eventually on August 29th, at the 17th meeting of the Working Mechanism and Consultation, both the sides, they agree to achieve a final resolution. So on July they talk about this, August they talk about reaching a final resolution, and eventually we'll see on September 12th, our External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar gave a very important statement. He said that about 75% of the disengagement problems with China has already been sorted out. And the very next day, the Chinese Foreign Ministry says that troops have disengaged at 4 places in eastern Ladakh, including Galwan Valley as well. So by this time, by September 13th, Chinese Foreign Ministry is also saying that disengagement has already taken place, especially in the Galwan Valley and 4 other important strategic areas as well. And by October 1st, our Army Chief General Upendra Dwivedi said that there needs to be trust between two armies, which is the biggest casualty of the standoff. And eventually, on October 21st, that is recently few days back, India says that it has arrived at an agreement with China on patrolling agreements along the line of actual control. And this is the issue, or this is the thing which we are talking about. Now, what is there for the future? What is next? See, disengagement is expected to lead to de-escalation of the lingering conflict which is there in the sensitive theatre and sensitive areas. And eventually, there will be de-induction of the rival soldiers through further talks between both the countries bilaterally. Now, since we have understood the chronology and we have understood that how after 2020, in the span of 4 years, this conflict it started, it erupted, it evolved, and now it is at the culmination of being solved because of an agreement between India and China in relation to line of actual control, patrolling. Now let us try to see through maps different other areas of contention between India and China as well. We'll be briefly seeing this and then we'll be moving on to the current agreement. Now, if you see this map, again, this is the western sector, this is the middle sector, and this is the eastern sector. Now, eastern sector, there is one line, that is McMahon line, again, which is a bone of contention because China says that whole of Arunachal Pradesh is a part of China, but currently it is administered by India. But India, according to India, we all know that it is a very integral and a very important part of Indian territory. Now, in this tri-junction area as well, there is one area that is Doklam, which is in the tri-junction of Bhutan, India and China. And this is where the standoff also began few years before this Galwan Valley clash. Doklam standoff, if you all remember. So escalation between India and China, it has been ongoing at least since last 1 decade. And now since we know about these contentions and the border areas very clearly, let us try to see that what is this recent agreement all about. So this recent agreement is about restoration of patrolling rights in the Depsang Plains and the Demchok area of Ladakh. And also the agreement on patrolling protocols, it includes that Indian patrols will be there twice a month and its strength will be 14 to 15 troops to avoid any form of escalation and skirmishes between the two armies of India and China. So this is an agreement which has been reached that patrolling rights will be restored for India, and also there will be an agreement on patrolling protocols. So new protocols are established in relation to border patrols. And also in the eastern theatre, we all talked about the western theatre and the western border, but with respect to the eastern theatre, that is the Arunachal Pradesh area and the other friction points, the discussion is currently ongoing between India and China. So currently discussions are taking place that how to resolve those border issues. Also, monthly meetings will be organized between the commanding officers and the military commanders to ensure that both the countries and both the countries' armies, they function smoothly alongside the border areas and there is no such clash or no such skirmish in future between the two countries. Now, while this agreement has been made, there is one statement given by India's army chief. He says that there is need to first restore trust between both the countries and assure each other on the buffer zones which have been agreed by the two countries. So this statement is very important. That first requirement between both the countries is restoration of trust which has eroded badly, especially in the last 1 decade. But the question is, why India and China relationships are so problematic? See, China is having one doctrine. You have to understand about this. That doctrine is about five-finger policy. Now, China views the part of Tibet, which borders India, as the palm. So, China views that Tibet is the palm and areas of Ladakh, Nepal, Sikkim, Bhutan and Arunachal Pradesh as its 5 fingers, and it claims influence over these regions through this 5-finger policy. So China is having this 5-finger policy in place. Now, of course, Ladakh and Arunachal Pradesh and Sikkim, they are integral part of India. And if China is having influence over these areas, China is claiming those areas in its doctrine, then it definitely means that China is directly challenging the territorial integrity and sovereignty of our country, which is against the very basic nature of our democracy, which is why issues between China and India has been ongoing since last many decades. Now, since we have understood about this recent agreement, let us see what could be the significance of this agreement in relation to our bilateral ties and what could be the way forward, the potential way forward. See, this agreement will have a very important role to play in lowering the risk of the upcoming skirmishes and escalations. So any skirmish or any escalation should not be arising in future. Because of that, this agreement becomes very, very important. Also, it will help in stability, to ensure stability in friction points and to reduce confrontation between the two armies. Because eventually who's losing the life? Who's losing their lives? The army soldiers, the army of our country, the soldiers of our country. They are losing lives. So this agreement will help in stabilizing the area and reducing border confrontations. And because of this stability in the border area, there will be stability in the region also. So Asian region, especially the South Asian region, will be stable if India and China border issues are resolved. And if this happens, of course, our bilateral ties will improve a lot, which has not happened, especially in the last 1 decade. So for the border ties to improve, this de-escalation is important and this agreement is very, very important. Also, one more thing is there. Since we are a very avid supporter of a multipolar global world, but we are also avid supporter of a multipolar Asia also. So because of this, China and India, they agreeing to the border issues, they solving the border issues, it is very important and imperative to achieve this target. That Asia should be multipolar, it should not be unipolar, that China is the only power. India, China and different other countries, they should step up and make a multipolar Asia. And if a multipolar Asia is there, definitely a multipolar world order definitely will be there. Where not just US and Russia are powerful, but US, Russia, India, China, South Africa and different other countries, they are also powerful. And not just two countries. Okay, and because of these agreements between India and China, economic cooperation between the countries would also deepen and there would be potential for further dialogue as well to solve the other issues which are there between the two countries. See, one thing to note here is that China still is India's largest trading partner. Now recently it has surpassed US and still it is the largest trading partner for India, with two-way trade between India and China amounting to $118 billion, which is massive and humongous, in the year 2023-2024. Which means that India and China economically, they are trading perfectly. Their trade is very high and India's deficit with China is also very high. So that needs to be corrected because India needs to have a surplus with China. Currently, India is importing a lot from China and exporting very less. So definitely India's role and India's intention should be to improve and boost its exports to China also. So with that respect, India's agreement with China in relation to border issues, it is very important and have a very important role to play. Now coming to the last thing, that is the concerns. See, all these things, they exist, but there are a lot of concerns also which needs to be addressed. First is the Belt and Road Initiative of China. Now this Belt and Road Initiative, it is passing through the Pakistan occupied Kashmir. Because of that, this China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, which is a part of BRI, it is passing through the Pakistan occupied Kashmir, which is an integral part of India, but is occupied by Pakistan currently. So it is against our territorial integrity and territorial sovereignty. Because of this, India and China issues are not being resolved. Now because of string of pearls strategy of China, because of some other strategies of being an aggressive neighborhood for other countries and for India also, it's a debt trap diplomacy, giving more and more debt to countries and till the time they become dependent on China. So a debt trap diplomacy which China is trying with Maldives, Sri Lanka and different other countries as well. And import dependency, this needs to be corrected, which we have already discussed, and different water disputes, especially with the Brahmaputra river, water sharing between India and China. So until and unless these issues are resolved, there are very less chances of normalcy in the ties between India and China. If you want to see a peaceful region, if you want to see a peaceful global order and a peaceful Asian region, South Asian region, India and China are two pillars of it and two pillars of strength in this region. So if both the countries, through dialogue, through participation and through regular engagement, if they are able to de-escalate and if they are able to resolve the issues which are there, resolve the contentious issues, definitely we will be able to have a powerful South Asia. And a powerful South Asia is very important for a multipolar and important new aged world order. So if you are able to ensure this, definitely world will be a better place. I hope you gained some new knowledge from this session. All the very best and have a great day. Thank you.